Greetings, PlayStation fans and beyond. It finally happened. Sony decided not to delay the new console any longer, especially after all the leaks, and introduced us to the brand new PlayStation 5 Pro. Opinions about it on the internet have been wildly divided, but why? What will the Pro version be like? Should you rush to place a pre-order, and who is this console really for? I'll explain everything right now. Let's get started. First off, remember that dry presentation at the start of the PS5 generation, where they spent an hour and a half telling us how fast the new generation's memory is and how it's the true next gen, though it oddly made everyone want to take a nap. Well, forget about it. It seems the company learned its lesson, and they approached the Pro version presentation much more thoroughly, making it brighter and more engaging. Well, as much as they could, considering everything had already been leaked, including the console's appearance, 2 weeks before the presentation. And yes, everything was confirmed except for one thing: the price. There was a lot of speculation, but no one said anything specific until Sony itself shocked everyone. This actually happened at the end of the presentation, but I suggest we start with that to keep the intrigue going. The Pro version will cost, not too little, not too much, but a whopping $700. But that's only in the US. In Europe, the same console will cost €800 or $880 at the current exchange rate, which is nearly $200 more. And here, of course, questions arise. Are Europeans really that much wealthier, or are we being scammed? Because it's unclear to me why the price is so different. The shipping from China, where all the consoles are assembled, to the US and Europe shouldn't cost that much more. At least, not by that much. Even the fat version in Europe was only $100 more than in the US. Although this was supposedly explained by some tax system, I didn't look into it, but still, it wasn't exactly pleasant. The funniest part is that they only introduced the digital version without a disc drive, probably to avoid shocking gamers, because the version with a drive in Europe reaches an astronomical $1,000. For reference, the disc drive itself costs around $80, plus an additional interchangeable panel, and if you want to buy a vertical stand, by the way, it's not included in the package and costs $30. So it all adds up to around $1,000. At least, for those who want it, there's the option to buy the drive separately and keep your library of physical game editions. But of course, that's small consolation since this is essentially one of the most expensive consoles in history, even considering inflation. But to be more objective, let's set the price aside for a moment and take a closer look at the console itself. To be more precise, let's talk about what they actually revealed. Maybe it's not all that bad and the Pro version is really worth the money? Let's start with the design. There's been no mystery for a while. The console kept the slim version's design with the split panels in the middle. However, since the console got taller, they had to widen the split, where they neatly added 3 angled plastic lines. It's a matter of taste, but I'm more concerned about how to place it. Remember, there's no stand included, and the feet that came with the slim version might not fit due to the slant of these stripes. Well, I assume the company found some solution to this issue, but we'll see it after the console's release, because it's unlikely to look very aesthetic. It's clear the designers intended for it to stand vertically. They also brought back the air intake fins. I really hated how they messed with the slim version by leaving huge gaps between the body and the panels, and apparently I wasn't the only one because Sony brought them back here. For that, I'm thankful. It really looks much better. Of course, these are just renders and comparisons from those who received the console or a mock-up, with the author clearly picking the best angles, but even so, it looks better than the slim version. Otherwise, the design hasn't changed much, unlike the console's internal components. At first glance, it may not seem like a big deal, but as an upgrade to the existing generation, everything looks logical. The video processor has increased by 67%, however, this is likely not for improving graphics quality itself, since even in the presentation, to notice any difference in texture details, they had to zoom in on the frame. More on that later. It's mainly for the new feature of the Pro console, neural network upscaling, which Sony calls PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, or PSSR for short. This is where an actual 2K resolution, or even lower, is turned into 4K by filling in extra pixels, without putting too much strain on the hardware. This is similar to how DLSS and FSR work on PC. In theory, and according to Mark Cerny, this will finally allow for 4K gaming at 60 FPS, and perhaps even 120 FPS in specially optimized games. These games will be marked as PS5 Pro Enhanced. They've announced that at launch in November, there will be 50 such games. Not the best sign, considering the launch of the PS5 generation, where upgrades for new consoles were sold for extra money. Hopefully, this won't be the case this time. What was pleasing, however, is the PS5 Pro Boost technology, a kind of equivalent to Xbox's FPS boost. This means that older games, even without special updates, will look better on the Pro version. In theory, with a higher frame rate. This is quite important for the previous generation, where most games were only released at 30 FPS. Additionally, the storage will be 2 terabytes with the option to install an SSD, and it will feature Wi-Fi 7 for faster game downloads. The RAM is also overclocked by 28%, which should allow for faster game launches and improve overall performance by about 40%. So, to summarize, this upgrade is built on 3 pillars: a larger video processor, AI-based enhancements, and, something I haven't mentioned yet, more detailed ray tracing. Sony claims this will be up to 3 times better than in the standard version. However, it's unclear whether this will work in performance mode or only in quality mode. At the very least, Sony has stated that, according to statistics, many people play in performance mode, prioritizing higher FPS over graphical beauty with ray tracing. Based on the tests that Sony showed us, it's still not entirely clear how this will work. Speaking of those tests, I'll say right away, real tests can only be done once the console is released. But what's interesting is that even now, what Sony has shown is absolutely unimpressive. As I mentioned, to show the difference, they had to crop the frame. Needless to say, in real life, you will never be looking that closely at the screen, let alone comparing 2 images side by side from different consoles. Most of the examples were static as well. In motion, the difference is even less noticeable. But yes, if you really focus, you can see that the Pro version has better draw distance and accordingly, less blurriness and polygonal shapes. But again, many people play sitting on a couch a few meters away from the TV, where such differences won't really be noticeable. Perhaps YouTube's compression is to blame, as it even compressed and ruined the detail in the 4K stream. Or maybe it's the games themselves, as the examples shown were from a few years old exclusives. If they had waited to present until the release of new games like Death Stranding 2 or GTA 6, it would have been more impressive. But for now, we're judging what we have. And what we have doesn't seem worth nearly double the price of the regular version. By the way, a side note, since this video is about the PS5 Pro, they didn't show us a single new game for this console. It's like the saying, a shoemaker without shoes. They've shown us a new, powerful console and are offering to play old games just with enhancements. To put it politely, that's, at the very least, strange. It feels like, having won the console war, Sony got complacent and decided they can do whatever they want, assuming everyone will go along with it. But judging by the comments online and the dislikes on the video, this time, people aren't buying it. What's more confusing is that the presentation tactfully avoided an important issue. Will 4K be native or the same upscaling as on the FAT version, just with 60 FPS? Because if it's the latter, that's really disappointing. We also shouldn't forget that the quality of games doesn't always depend on the console's performance. A lot depends on the developer's competence. As they say, there's no samurai without a path. No matter how many teraflops you pack into a console, if the game isn't properly optimized, it won't run well. And given the trend in recent years, where even respected game studios rush to release unfinished, buggy products in pursuit of money, it's easy to assume this will continue. Only Sony exclusives will work relatively well. But even here, there's an issue. Sony hasn't released that many games in this generation, and it doesn't seem like they'll be releasing many before the end of 2025. Still, everyone hopes this is just temporary. So the question arises, why should I, as an ordinary gamer who already owns a standard PS5, buy the new version? It's understandable if you have an old PS4 and want to upgrade, but even among such gamers, you can find comments online saying, "For that kind of money, I'd rather buy a PC." Let me remind you, many people loved consoles because they offered a relatively affordable way to play current games. But now, Sony is rolling out a console for which, at its regional price, you could build a mid-range PC that would run all modern games. These games include Sony exclusives, even if they come out a year or two after their release on PlayStation. The main killer feature, though, is that on PC, first of all, online gaming is free, something console players have long forgotten. And secondly, you have access to all games, including Microsoft's exclusives, like Fallout and the newly acquired Call of Duty. Plus, there's another advantage. On PC, you can install mods, which reminds me of the recent release of Fallout London, available only on PC. In short, the advantages of PCs over consoles are undeniable, and if consoles used to win because of their price, now the Pro version is approaching the point where, with a little extra money, you can build yourself a PC. Although technically speaking, the PS5 Pro hardware is really worth its price. A comparable PC with similar specs would cost around $1,500 to $2,000, so for some people, the PS5 Pro is a good option. But based on the tests we've seen, this isn't entirely obvious. The difference is noticeable only if you take images from both consoles and compare them side by side. Even then, the graphics on the FAT version don't look bad at all. That's why, in my opinion, many people won't even consider upgrading and will continue to buy the FAT or Slim versions. So what do we end up with? In my opinion, it's a repeat of the PS3 story, when at launch, Ken Kutaragi came out to the audience, announced the price of the console, which was clearly overpriced, and said, "If you don't have the money, then go get a job, no need to play games." I'm not joking, this was almost a direct quote. But unlike that situation, we actually have a choice here. Either the standard version at a reasonable price or the Pro version for the most hardcore gamers willing to pay a higher price. And with the fat version, for a price lower than the Pro, you also get a disk drive. So I think most people will continue to buy it. So why release the Pro version? Or more precisely, for whom? There are two answers. First, for those who bought the Pro version on the PS4 back in the day, which was only about 10 to 13%. These are the people who want top-tier graphics even at the end of a generation. Let me remind you that a comparable PC with similar specs still costs twice as much. And while the difference in graphics might not be very noticeable right now, I think it will become more evident over time. Secondly, the console was most likely released for the shareholders. After all, the Pro version is also an image product, and the company needs to show investors that everything is going well. Even though the number of dislikes under the presentation didn't boost its image much, for shareholders, it's not about likes on YouTube, but the dollar price of the stocks. And those prices have gone up a bit. But I'm still conflicted. Logically, I understand that the price is fair for such hardware, but emotionally, it's hard to accept such a cost for a console, especially considering Sony's stinginess in not even including a stand in the package. If the price were at least $100 lower, the console would be, if not perfect, then at least acceptable. But when the price of a gaming console makes you think, should I just buy a PC? It's definitely not a good sign. After all, for the price of this console, you could build a slightly weaker PC, but with more advantages. And over time, you could just upgrade the graphics card and get even better graphics than the PS5 Pro. In the end, it's nice that we still have the regular version, and because of it, most people will likely skip the Pro version. Share your thoughts about the console in the comments. I'd love to read and discuss them. That's the end of the video. When the console is released, I'll definitely do a review, so make sure to subscribe. And don't forget to support the video with a like. See you soon in the next videos.